They never expected her to find love. In fact, the entire group of friends had quietly orchestrated this blind date for one purpose only: to mock her. A simple woman who had endured countless failures became nothing more than a punchline in their eyes. But no one could have imagined that sitting across from her in that upscale restaurant would be a man completely different from what they had envisioned. A young, successful CEO whose eyes held exhaustion and deep, hidden wounds. This man was a single father struggling between his career and the responsibility of raising his child. And just when they thought this story would be nothing more than a cruel joke, the truth took a turn that left everyone stunned. Hours later, amid shocked stares, he stood up and proposed to her. Sarah Mitchell had always been the type of person who blended into crowds. At 28, she worked as a library assistant in downtown Portland, earning just enough to cover her modest one-bedroom apartment and her aging Honda Civic. Her days followed a predictable rhythm, opening the library at 8 in the morning, helping patrons find books, organizing returns, and closing up by 6 in the evening. She found comfort in the quiet sanctuary of books and the gentle hum of fluorescent lights above towering shelves. Her appearance matched her unassuming personality. Sarah had shoulder-length brown hair that she usually kept in a simple ponytail, hazel eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a wardrobe consisting mainly of cardigans, modest blouses, and comfortable flats. She had given up on makeup years ago, save for a touch of lip balm and mascara on special occasions. The mirror had become an enemy rather than a friend, reflecting back what she saw as ordinary features and a figure that never quite matched the magazine standards her friends seemed to effortlessly achieve. The group that surrounded Sarah had been her college friends once, though their bond had grown increasingly strained over the years. There was Jessica, now a successful marketing executive who drove a BMW and lived in a downtown loft. Her Instagram was a carefully curated collection of expensive dinners, weekend getaways, and designer outfits. Then there was Amanda, who had married her college sweetheart and now lived in the suburbs with twin boys and a golden retriever. She spent her days at yoga classes and organizing playdates, often posting about her perfect family life. The third member of their circle was Rachel, a real estate agent who specialized in luxury homes. She had developed a sharp tongue over the years, using humor as a weapon disguised as friendship. Rachel was the one who had initiated most of the subtle digs at Sarah's expense, commenting on her outdated clothes or suggesting she needed to put herself out there more. The others would laugh along, creating an atmosphere where Sarah felt like she was constantly the butt of inside jokes she didn't quite understand. Their weekly coffee meetings at the trendy downtown cafe had become increasingly uncomfortable for Sarah. She would sit quietly while the others discussed their latest achievements, romantic adventures, and social events. When they asked about her life, Sarah would mention a new book display she had organized or a particularly interesting patron she had helped, only to watch their eyes glaze over with polite disinterest. The cruel idea had been brewing for weeks. During one of their gatherings, Rachel had casually mentioned knowing someone who might be perfect for Sarah. The others had exchanged knowing glances, smirks barely concealed behind their coffee cups. They painted a picture of a successful businessman who was looking for someone genuine and down to earth. Sarah's heart had fluttered with hope, a feeling she hadn't experienced in months. Her last relationship had ended 2 years ago when David, her boyfriend of 6 months, had slowly distanced himself after meeting her friends. He had begun making excuses to avoid group gatherings, and eventually, he told her that he felt they were moving in different directions in life. The breakup had been gentle but devastating, leaving Sarah wondering if she was destined to remain alone. The anticipation of the blind date had consumed Sarah's thoughts for days. She had spent her savings on a new dress, a soft blue number that she hoped made her look more sophisticated. She had even splurged on a professional blowout, feeling almost glamorous as she looked at herself in the salon mirror. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to be with someone who truly appreciated her quiet strengths and gentle nature. What Sarah didn't know was that her friends had been exchanging messages in their group chat for weeks, crafting what they called their masterpiece of entertainment. They had chosen a restaurant known for its pretentious atmosphere and astronomical prices, somewhere they knew would make Sarah feel out of place. The man they had described didn't exist at all. Instead, they had arranged for someone they expected would be equally unimpressive. Someone who would provide them with hours of amusement, as they watched two people they considered beneath their social status fumble through an awkward evening. The restaurant, Le Bernardin, was everything Sarah had feared. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over white tablecloths, and the soft murmur of conversation mixed with the gentle clinking of expensive silverware. She had arrived 15 minutes early, her palms sweating as she clutched her small purse and followed the hostess to a table near the window. The prices on the menu made her stomach clench with anxiety, but she reminded herself that this was supposed to be special. Meanwhile, across town, a completely different story was unfolding. Michael Thompson sat in his corner office on the 32nd floor of the Thompson Industries building, staring out at the Portland skyline as the sun began to set. At 34, he had built a technology consulting firm from the ground up, employing over 200 people and generating millions in annual revenue. His success, however, had come at a tremendous personal cost. Michael's dark hair showed the first hints of gray at the temples, a testament to the stress he carried daily. His deep blue eyes, once bright with ambition and joy, now held a weariness that seemed permanently etched into his features. The expensive suits he wore couldn't hide the slight slump in his shoulders, the posture of a man carrying more weight than any one person should bear. 3 years ago, his world had shattered when his wife, Lisa, died in a car accident on her way home from a business trip. She had been 6 months pregnant with their second child at the time, leaving Michael not only grief-stricken but also solely responsible for their 3-year-old daughter, Emily. The loss had been so devastating that Michael had seriously considered selling his company and disappearing somewhere far away from all the memories that haunted every corner of their life together. Emily was now 6 years old, a bright and energetic girl with her mother's golden curls and Michael's piercing blue eyes. She had adapted to life without her mother with the resilience that only children possess, but Michael knew she felt the absence deeply. She often asked why other children had 2 parents while she only had one, questions that broke Michael's heart anew each time. Balancing his role as CEO with single parenthood had proven nearly impossible. Michael employed a full-time nanny, Mrs. Henderson, a kind woman in her 60s who had become like family to them both. Even with her help, Michael struggled with the constant guilt of missing school events, bedtime stories, and weekend activities due to work commitments. He had tried dating a few times over the past year, but every relationship seemed to fizzle out when women realized the extent of his responsibilities and emotional unavailability. The blind date had been arranged by his business partner and closest friend, James Williams. James had grown increasingly concerned about Michael's isolation and had finally convinced him that meeting someone new might be beneficial. James had painted a picture of a sweet, genuine woman who would understand Michael's situation and appreciate his dedication to his daughter. What James hadn't revealed was that he had coordinated with Sarah's friends, who had assured him that their friend needed exactly the kind of stable, successful man that Michael represented. As Michael straightened his tie and prepared to leave the office, he felt a familiar mixture of anticipation and dread. Part of him hoped that tonight might bring some light into his carefully controlled but emotionally barren existence. Another part of him worried that he was setting himself up for another disappointing evening of small talk and polite disinterest when his date inevitably learned about the complexities of his life. The restaurant buzzed with the energy of successful Portland professionals enjoying their evening meals. Sarah sat nervously at her table, checking her phone every few minutes and adjusting her dress. She had ordered a glass of wine to calm her nerves, though she was nursing it slowly, conscious of both the price and the need to stay sharp for conversation. When Michael walked through the restaurant's entrance, the hostess immediately recognized him as one of their most prominent regular customers. He had dined here countless times for business meetings, charity events, and the occasional attempt at dating. Tonight, however, felt different. As he scanned the restaurant for his blind date, his eyes settled on a woman sitting alone by the window, and something unexpected happened. Sarah looked up from her phone just as a tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit approached her table. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized this must be her date. He was nothing like what she had expected, nothing like the kind of man she thought she deserved. His presence commanded attention without demanding it, and when he smiled at her, the expression reached his eyes in a way that suggested genuine warmth rather than mere politeness. Michael, for his part, was equally surprised. The woman sitting before him possessed a natural beauty that had nothing to do with designer clothes or professional styling. Her nervous smile was authentic, her posture suggested humility rather than arrogance, and something in her eyes spoke of depth and understanding. For the first time in years, Michael felt a spark of genuine interest rather than obligation. Unknown to either of them, Sarah's friends had secured a table across the restaurant where they could observe the proceedings. They had arrived 30 minutes early, ordering appetizers and cocktails, while positioning themselves for the best view of what they expected to be an evening of entertainment. Jessica had her phone ready to capture any particularly awkward moments, while Rachel prepared a running commentary that she planned to share in their group chat. Michael extended his hand to Sarah as he reached the table. His handshake was firm but gentle, and Sarah noticed the calluses on his palms that suggested he wasn't afraid of hard work, despite his obvious success. When he spoke, his voice was deep and warm, carrying a slight nervousness that somehow made Sarah feel more at ease. The initial conversation flowed more naturally than either had expected. Michael found himself genuinely interested in Sarah's work at the library, asking thoughtful questions about her favorite books and the challenges of working in public service during budget cuts. Sarah was surprised to discover that Michael was an avid reader himself, particularly drawn to biographies of business leaders and historical fiction. As they talked, both began to relax in ways they hadn't experienced in years. Sarah forgot about the expensive surroundings and her friend's watching eyes, instead focusing on the intelligent, attentive man across from her who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. Michael found himself opening up about his work in ways he rarely did on first dates, discussing the challenges of building a company culture that prioritized both innovation and employee well-being. The turning point came when Michael mentioned his daughter almost casually, watching Sarah's face carefully for the inevitable change in expression. He had learned to recognize the moment when women realized that dating him meant accepting a ready-made family with all the complications that entailed. Most would maintain politeness while subtly beginning to create distance, their interest visibly waning as they calculated the challenges ahead. Sarah's reaction was completely different. Her face lit up with genuine interest as she asked about Emily's age, her interests, and how she was adjusting to starting elementary school. Michael found himself sharing stories about his daughter's precocious questions, her love of building elaborate structures with blocks, and her recent obsession with learning to read chapter books. For the first time, Michael felt like someone was truly listening to him talk about the most important person in his life. The conversation deepened as Sarah shared her own experiences of growing up in a single-parent household after her father left when she was 12. She spoke about watching her mother work 2 jobs to keep their small family afloat, and how that experience had taught her the value of resilience and sacrifice. Michael was struck by the lack of bitterness in her voice as she recounted what must have been a difficult childhood, instead focusing on the lessons learned and the strength gained. As the evening progressed, both Sarah and Michael found themselves sharing more than they had intended. The artificial boundaries that typically governed first-date conversations seemed to dissolve naturally. Michael talked about the overwhelming responsibility of being solely responsible for another person's happiness and development, while Sarah opened up about the loneliness of her current life and her fears that she might never find someone who would accept her exactly as she was. Across the restaurant, Sarah's friends were growing increasingly frustrated. This was not going according to their plan at all. The man who was supposed to provide them with entertainment was clearly successful, attractive, and genuinely engaged in conversation with Sarah. Worse yet, Sarah herself seemed to be thriving in his presence, displaying a confidence and animation they rarely saw from her in their group settings. Rachel began sending increasingly pointed messages to their group chat, commenting on Sarah's obvious attempts to impress her date and predicting that the evening would still end in disappointment. Jessica took candid photos of the couple, planning to analyze every gesture and expression later for signs of the awkwardness they were determined to find. But something else was happening at Sarah's table, something none of her friends could have predicted or understood. 2 people who had both experienced profound loneliness and disappointment were discovering an unexpected connection. Their conversation had moved beyond polite first-date topics into territory that suggested the possibility of something deeper and more meaningful. Michael surprised himself by telling Sarah about the guilt he carried over Lisa's death, sharing his fear that he had been too focused on work to be the husband she deserved. Sarah listened without judgment, offering gentle insights about grief and healing that came from her own experience of loss. She told him about her grandmother, who had been her closest confidant and had died just 2 years earlier, leaving Sarah feeling more alone than ever before. As they talked, both began to see glimpses of the people they used to be before life had worn them down with disappointment and responsibility. Sarah's laugh became more frequent and genuine, while Michael's shoulders seemed to relax for the first time in months. They discovered shared interests in hiking, classic movies, and a mutual love of Sunday morning farmers markets. The restaurant around them faded into background noise as they became absorbed in their conversation. Other diners came and went, but Sarah and Michael remained at their table, completely focused on each other. The expensive meal they had ordered sat barely touched as they prioritized connection over cuisine. It was nearly 10 o'clock when the spell was finally broken. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Henderson, reminding him that Emily had a soccer game the following morning and needed to be in bed by 9:30. The intrusion of reality brought both of them back to the present moment, though neither wanted the evening to end. As Michael signaled for the check, Sarah began to reach for her purse, but he waved her away with a smile. The gesture wasn't about displaying wealth or traditional gender roles. It was simply a man who wanted to take care of someone who had given him something precious that evening. For the first time in years, Michael had felt understood and accepted, flaws and complications included. The walk to Sarah's car was quiet but comfortable. Both were processing the unexpected turn their evening had taken, trying to understand how a blind date arranged by well-meaning friends had evolved into something that felt like the beginning of a genuine connection. When they reached her Honda, Michael asked if he could see her again, and Sarah's yes was immediate and heartfelt. But as they stood on the sidewalk exchanging phone numbers, Sarah's phone buzzed with a series of messages from Jessica, Amanda, and Rachel. The texts were filled with mocking commentary about her obvious attempts to impress her date. Jokes about how she was probably already planning their wedding in her head. And bets about how quickly he would lose interest once he got to know the real Sarah. Sarah's face went pale as she read the messages, the joy of the evening crashing down around her as the cruel reality of the situation became clear. This beautiful, unexpected connection she had felt wasn't real at all. It was just another setup, another opportunity for her friends to mock her desperate attempts at finding love. The man standing in front of her, this successful, attractive CEO, had probably been briefed on her pathetic dating history, and was currently enduring the evening out of politeness or pity. Michael noticed the immediate change in Sarah's demeanor, and asked if everything was all right. Sarah looked up at him, tears beginning to form in her eyes, and the words tumbled out before she could stop them. She told him about her friend's cruel joke, about how they had set up this date as entertainment, about how she had been foolish enough to believe that someone like him could genuinely be interested in someone like her. The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. Not because he was disgusted by the setup, but because he was furious that anyone would treat Sarah with such casual cruelty. In the few hours he had known her, she had shown him more genuine warmth and understanding than he had experienced in years of professional networking and social obligations. The idea that her own friends would use her vulnerability for their amusement filled him with a protective anger he hadn't felt since becoming a father. Michael's response was immediate and fierce. He took Sarah's hands in his, looking directly into her eyes, and told her that whatever game her friends thought they were playing had nothing to do with what he had experienced that evening. He explained that he had felt more genuine connection with her in one dinner than in years of dating, and that if her friends couldn't see her worth, that said everything about their character and nothing about hers. Sarah was stunned by the intensity of Michael's response. She had expected him to make polite excuses and disappear, relieved to escape the awkward situation. Instead, he was defending her with a passion that suggested his feelings about their evening were as real as her own had been. The realization that their connection might be genuine, that she hadn't imagined the spark between them, was overwhelming. Michael suggested they leave the restaurant area entirely and continue their conversation somewhere private. They drove to a nearby park where they could walk and talk without the possibility of being observed or overheard. Under the soft glow of streetlights, they continued the conversation that had begun hours earlier, but now with an added layer of honesty and vulnerability. Sarah told Michael about years of feeling invisible and unworthy, about how her friend's treatment had eroded her self-confidence until she barely recognized the person she used to be. Michael shared his own struggles with loneliness and the challenge of trying to be both mother and father to Emily, while maintaining the professional persona his business required. They discovered that despite their different life circumstances, they had both been existing rather than truly living for far too long. As they talked, Michael made a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. He asked Sarah if she would like to meet Emily. Not immediately, not as a romantic introduction, but as someone who had shown genuine interest in the most important part of his life. Sarah was both honored and terrified by the invitation, understanding the significance of being introduced to a single father's child. The following weekend, Michael arranged a casual meeting at a local children's museum. Emily was a bundle of energy, with her mother's golden curls and an infectious curiosity about everything around her. Sarah was nervous about making a good impression, but Emily's natural openness quickly put her at ease. They spent the afternoon exploring interactive exhibits, and Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying the experience of seeing the world through a 6-year-old's eyes. Emily, with the directness that only children possess, announced during their lunch at the museum cafe that she liked Sarah better than the other ladies her daddy had brought around. She explained that Sarah actually listened when she talked, and didn't try to impress her father by pretending to be interested in things kids liked. The innocent observation struck both adults as profoundly accurate. As they prepared to leave the museum, Emily made a comment that would change everything. Looking up at her father with serious blue eyes, she asked why he couldn't marry Sarah since she was nice and didn't make him sad like the other grown-ups did. The question was asked with such innocent logic that it left both Michael and Sarah speechless. Meanwhile, Sarah's former friends had been busy spreading word about her pathetic blind date, sharing photos and commentary with their broader social circle. They had convinced themselves that they were providing entertainment and perhaps even doing Sarah a favor by showing her how unrealistic her romantic expectations were. What they hadn't expected was for the story to take on a life of its own. Word of the setup had somehow reached Michael's business associate, who mentioned it during a client dinner. Michael was mortified to learn that Sarah had been subjected to public humiliation, and his anger at her friend's cruelty intensified. He made a decision that night that would shock everyone who thought they knew the reserved CEO. The annual Portland Business Alliance Charity Gala was one of the city's most prestigious social events. Michael attended every year as a major sponsor, typically bringing a different woman as his date or attending alone. This year, he asked Sarah to accompany him, not as a casual date but as someone he was proud to have by his side. Sarah was terrified at the prospect of attending such a high-profile event, but Michael's quiet confidence gave her strength. She invested in an elegant black dress that made her feel beautiful for the first time in years, and Michael arranged for a professional stylist to help her feel comfortable in the formal setting. The evening of the gala, Sarah's former friends were in attendance as guests of their respective partners. They spotted Sarah immediately, exchanging smirks and preparing to enjoy what they assumed would be another opportunity to mock her romantic misadventures. What they weren't prepared for was the sight of Michael Thompson, one of Portland's most eligible bachelors, treating Sarah with obvious affection and respect. As the evening progressed, it became clear that this wasn't a pity date or a charitable gesture on Michael's part. He introduced Sarah to colleagues and friends with genuine pride, and she charmed everyone she met with her natural warmth and intelligence. The woman they had dismissed as ordinary was revealed to be someone extraordinary when she was valued and appreciated properly. The climax came during the charity auction, when Michael made an unexpected decision. Instead of simply bidding on items like the other guests, he asked for the microphone and addressed the crowd of several hundred people. With Sarah standing beside him, visibly shocked by his sudden public gesture, Michael began to speak about the power of authentic connection in a world full of superficial relationships. He talked about meeting someone who had shown him what it meant to be truly understood and accepted. Someone who had brought joy back into his life and light into his daughter's world. Then, to the amazement of everyone present, including Sarah herself, Michael got down on one knee and proposed to her in front of Portland's social elite. The room fell completely silent as Sarah, tears streaming down her face, said yes to the man who had seen her worth when she could barely see it herself. The applause that followed was thunderous, and Sarah's former friends sat frozen in their seats, realizing that their cruel joke had backfired spectacularly. The months that followed were a whirlwind of wedding planning, blending families, and learning to navigate life as a couple. Sarah moved into Michael's home, becoming not just his wife, but a stepmother to Emily, who had insisted on calling her Mama Sarah from the beginning. The library promoted Sarah to head of children's services, recognizing skills and qualities that had been overlooked for years. Michael discovered that having a true partner transformed not just his personal life but his professional effectiveness as well. Sarah's calm wisdom and emotional intelligence helped him become a better leader, while her unwavering support gave him the confidence to take calculated risks that drove his company to new heights. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair held in the same park where they had first talked honestly about their hopes and fears. Emily served as flower girl, beaming with pride as she watched her two favorite people promise to love each other forever. The guest list notably excluded Sarah's former friends, who had been quietly removed from her life, as she surrounded herself with people who valued her authentic self. The story of their unusual courtship became legendary in Portland social circles, not as a joke but as a testament to the power of looking beyond surface appearances to find real connection. Michael often told people that his wife had taught him the difference between being successful and being fulfilled, while Sarah credited him with showing her that she deserved to be loved exactly as she was. Years later, when Emily was older and curious about how her parents had met, they would tell her the story with complete honesty. They explained that sometimes people who seem like friends don't always have good intentions, but that true love can emerge from the most unexpected circumstances. Emily would listen with wide eyes, amazed that what started as someone's cruel joke had become her family's greatest blessing. The cruel friends who had orchestrated the original setup eventually faded from Sarah's life entirely. Without her to serve as their target, their group dynamic changed, and they drifted apart as the artificial bond of shared mockery dissolved. Some of them, in quieter moments, recognized the loss of someone who had been genuinely kind and loyal despite their treatment of her. Sarah often reflected on how different her life might have been if she had never agreed to that blind date. If she had let her friend's cruelty break her spirit completely. Instead, she had found not just love but a sense of self-worth that no one could take away. The woman who had once felt invisible had become the center of a loving family, proof that sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unlikely beginnings. Their love story served as a reminder that genuine connection transcends social status, physical appearance, and the superficial standards that so often govern modern relationships. In a world that often rewards pretense and punishment authenticity, Sarah and Michael had found each other by being courageously, vulnerably themselves. Their marriage became a testament to the transformative power of being truly seen and accepted by another person, flaws and all. The blind date that was meant to be a joke had instead become the foundation of a love story that would endure for decades, inspiring everyone who heard it to look beyond appearances and trust in the possibility that real love still existed in an increasingly cynical world.